Welcome to our spooky middle grade on-demand school visit. We are 5 of the spooky middle grade authors, and we are here to answer all of your terrifying publishing and writing questions today. But first, let us introduce ourselves. We will begin with the absolutely terrifying Jacqueline.
Hey, I am Jacqueline West. I write middle grade NYA novels, including the series The Books of Elsewhere, which are about a girl named Olive who moves into this strange old stone house with her family and discovers that she can climb into the paintings that have been left hanging on the walls by the former owners, and that both those paintings and the house itself are full of dangerous secrets. I also wrote a series called The Collectors, looks like this. This is about a boy named Van who discovers this realm hidden beneath his city, which is filled with collectors, not quite human people and their creatures, whose job is to collect all the wishes that are made by us normal people living in the world above. But now that he has seen them and they have seen him, Van gets tangled up in this coming wish magic war, and he's going to have to figure out which side he wants to be on. I also wrote a book called Digging Up Danger with the Story Pirates, and this is about a possibly haunted rare plant store in New York City, and it's also a mystery writing guide. So it's full of tips and tricks and little activities to do. So if you also want to write mysteries, you might enjoy Digging Up Danger. And that's me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. And now to my partner in hats, let's go to David Neilsen.
Hi, my name is David Neilsen, and I'm excited to be here. I am the author of Dr. Fell and the Playground of Doom, which is the story of this gentleman who moves into the neighborhood and builds the world's most amazing playground, but of course has a dark secret. Also, I'm the author of Beyond the Doors, the story of 4 individuals who move in with an aunt they didn't even know existed and find themselves going through an adventure through other people's memories by traveling through a series of doors they find lying around the house. And that's me. Back to you, Kim.
Oh my, I am so terrified. But let's take a trip to the ghostly realm now so we can be even more terrified and hear from the amazing Tania del Rio.
Hi, my name is Tania del Rio, and I am the author of the Warren the 13th trilogy. It's about this guy right here, Warren the 13th. He's a 12-year-old bellhop who runs his family's ancient, crumbling hotel with no help from his lazy Uncle Rupert or his evil Aunt Anaconda. Now, over the course of Warren's adventures, he discovers secrets hidden inside his hotel. Not only secrets, but creatures living in the boiler room, and possibly ghosts, and other surprises. Warren solves so many riddles and puzzles along the way. His adventures take him outside his hotel into forests filled with creatures known as Sasquatches, and even underwater, where Warren has to fight pirates, sea witches, and contend with things like talking clams. Each book is very, very illustrated by Will Staley and has beautiful layouts. So I hope that you will check out the series. It's full of mystery and adventure, and of course, it's very spooky.
Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. I was just chatting with my little friend here, but let's finish our introductions. I would love to hear from Miss Samantha M. Clark.
Hello. Spooky afternoon to you. My name is Samantha M. Clark, and I am the author of this book, The Boy, the Boat, and the Beast, about a boy who wakes up on a beach. He doesn't know who he is, where he is, or how he got there. But of course, as he tries to leave, everything turns scary, and he has to try to face all of his fears so that he can find his way home. And of course, there's a beast. There's a beast. trying to trace him too. And then that one's already out, and then coming out in June 22nd next year, 2021, is Arrow, which is about a boy who is the only human who's grown up living in this magical hidden rainforest. And he has a monkey friend, but along the way, as the magic is starting to disappear, these other humans are starting to infiltrate the forest. And as they do, the boy has to decide whether he wants to be accepted by them or save his home. And that's me. Back to you, Kim.
Love it. Thank you so much. Cannot wait to read all of these amazing books. And let's go now to the mysterious Josh Roberts.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Roberts. I am the author of The Witches of Willow Cove, which is an upper middle grade spooky mystery adventure fantasy novel. It's the first in a series, and the main character is named Abby Shepherd. She's a 13-year-old 7th grade student who discovers on her 13th birthday that she has magical powers. Then a mysterious stranger arrives in town and reveals that Abby is descended from someone with connections to the Salem witch trials, and it turns out that several other girls in town also have similar connections. And the stranger, whose name is Miss Winters, offers to teach Abby everything there is to know about witchcraft. There's only one problem. Abby's best friend thinks that Miss Winters might be responsible for the disappearance of his mother and several other people around town. So as Abby is learning about witchcraft, she has to decide who she can trust when all of the adults in her life seem to be telling her lies and keeping secrets. And, it is the first in a series, and the next book is called The Curse of Willow Cove, and that is coming out I don't actually have a release date, but it's coming out soon. Writing it now.
Excellent. We will be looking for the second one in the series. And I guess I should introduce myself as well. I'm Kim Ventrella, author of this book called Skeleton Tree. What if you went outside one day and discovered a finger bone in your backyard, and then it started to grow into a full-size skeleton that only children can see? What would happen? Find out in Skeleton Tree. In Bone Hollow, imagine you fell off a roof one day, and after that, everyone in town suddenly thinks you're dead, even though you feel fine. What is that all about? Well, that exact thing happens to Gabe in Bone Hollow. Read to find out more. I also wrote this book called Hello Future Me, and one fun thing from this book is the main character, June, discovers a laptop from this old junk shop that pops up overnight in her town, and she starts getting warning messages from her future self from 10 years in the future. And she warns June to never, ever go back to that shop and never use the magical objects. Do you think she listens? I also wrote this book, The Secret Life of Sam. Sam discovers a way, a portal through which he can visit his dead father once again and maybe even be with him for good. But the portal only opens once a day at the exact time of Pa's accident. And this mysterious shape-shifting boy / cat warns him the portal will not stay open long. What will Sam do? Find out in The Secret Life of Sam. And that's a little bit about me. Back to the main program. And that is all about us. So we are going to answer your burning questions. And this first question is actually the most common question that we get from students across the country. And that is, how do you get your ideas? So first, we are going to go to Jacqueline West to get your answer to this burning question.
Sure. The truth is, kind of like some characters in one of my books, I feel like I am a wish, not a wish collector, but an idea collector, that I am constantly finding things and gathering them. Like I'm a magpie for ideas. Whatever little sparkly, shiny thing interests me, whether it's a conversation, a place I've traveled, something I've overheard, a piece of art I've seen, and then they slowly come together in my brain, kind of like a jigsaw puzzle, until finally they form themselves into a story. So I'm constantly gathering things that might be ideas. They come from everywhere. I mean, the Books of Elsewhere began with something I saw out the school bus window when I was 12 years old. So you never know where an idea is going to come from. You just have to be constantly gathering them.
Yes, we are all idea collectors as writers. And let's go to the very ghostly Tania del Rio, who has another take on this question.
Where do I get my ideas? That's a great question. I think writers are sort of like human sponges. We just absorb everything that we experience throughout our day. So as for me, I get my ideas from literally everywhere. As you can see, I have a lot of books, so I'm constantly reading, and I love to read all different genres. I read mystery, I read adventure, I read history, romance, sci-fi, anything you can think of. And reading and even watching shows and movies is a great inspiration for ideas. I get ideas from experiences I have, interactions I have with people, conversations I have with people. Sometimes something funny will happen and I'll write it down. I also get inspiration and ideas from dreams. I'm always carrying a little notebook around with me, and as you can see, it's filled with random notes, and I'm constantly jotting things down throughout the day. If I think of something, I'll write it down, because you never know when inspiration will strike. It can happen totally randomly, so it's always good to be prepared. But yes, I think ideas can come from anywhere, and sometimes from unexpected places too. You could just see a funny sign, or your pets, even anything. So I think to be a good writer, you should be observant and just be open to whatever comes your way, and don't discount any ideas. If you get something that sounds too crazy or too silly, write it down anyway, because you never know where it might fit.
Absolutely. Excellent advice. I don't know about y'all, but I am super envious of Tanya's bookshelves. Those are some good looking bookshelves. Let's go to our second frequently asked question. And this question is, how do you create interesting characters? So to answer our question, we're going to first visit with Samantha M. Clark.
That's a really good question. And for me, in fact, I was talking to another writer about this just this morning. There's lots of places online where you can find interviews with your characters, like, what's their favorite ice cream and, favorite kind of candy. Those kind of things have never worked for me, but they do work for a lot of people. So if that works for you, I say go for it. Interview your characters. For me, creating interesting characters really comes down to getting to know them and finding out what their quirks are, not just the kind of color hair they have, or how tall they are, but what they really want in this moment, and what they want out of their life right now, and that can be so different. For the boy, the boat, and the beast, he wants to find out how he got home, and he has amnesia, and so it took me a long time to figure out what the boy really, where he came from and what his background was. And I had to ask a lot of questions of the boy along the way before I really understood who he was. And it just involved a lot of writing and a lot of thinking and a lot of asking, putting him into situations, trying to figure out what he would do. And of course, in every character that I write, there's a little bit of me in everything. And no, I think that's really how I create characters, interesting characters, the most, is trying to make them as three-dimensional as possible.
Very interesting. Samantha M. Clark is one of those interesting characters, I would say. And let's head over to another interesting character, Josh Roberts, and get your take.
All right, so how do I create interesting characters? Well, I usually start with a simple question, which is, what does the character want, and why can't that character have it? And once I'm figuring out the problem that the characters face, whether it's an internal struggle or an external thing that they want, and what obstacles are in the way, both mentally and physically and emotionally standing between them, then as I start to have an idea of what the story and the struggle is going to be like, then the character just kind of becomes a living person. And for me, one of the ways that I get to know my character is through dialogue. And so I have lots and lots of conversations, not between me and the character, but between various characters, where their personality will emerge. The way they speak, the way they think, all of that comes out through the dialogue. And I tend to have large collections, large files of just conversations between characters that will probably never make it into any of the books that I've written, but help inform me as to how these characters think. And that's when their quirks begin to come out in their conversations with each other. So for me, it's about primarily, what does the character want? Why can't they have it? And what are they willing to do to overcome that obstacle?
Thanks, Josh. That is very interesting. I love all those conversations that we never get to see. Maybe one day we'll get to check out some of those secret conversations between Josh's characters. Very cool. Well, we are actually going to head back to Josh because I have a very difficult question for you. Well, it's actually kind of easy to answer. And that is, what is the hardest part of writing?
The hardest part of writing is all of it. Every single part of it is hard. It's also fun. It's also wonderful. But in all seriousness, for me, and I think maybe for a lot of people, the hardest part of writing is writing when you don't feel like it, writing when the inspiration isn't there. Because it's, relatively speaking, it is easy to write when you have a great idea. It's easy to write when you're sort of feeling it and you know exactly what you want to write. It's harder to write when you don't know what you're going to write, or when you'd rather be doing something else. And that sort of comes down to discipline and forcing yourself to commit to working on something. And sometimes that means you're going to stare at the computer for 2 hours and come away with 2 sentences. And sometimes it means you're just not going to want to stop writing because it's going so well. But it's really about showing up, putting in the time, and living with your story, even when you are struggling. So the hardest part of writing is committing to it and keeping with it.
Yeah, that is so true. So true. And I'm also going to answer this one as well, because I think another hard part of writing for me, especially when I was starting out, and it's gotten a lot easier, is this idea of translating the beautiful, perfect vision that you have for the story in your imagination, putting that down in words, in this tangible form, in a story that feels as amazing and beautiful and powerful to readers as it does to you in your head. That for me is just the difficult part of really any type of creative expression. And so I think the only way to learn how to do this, the act of like translating the idea that is in your head onto paper in a form that readers will experience like similar to the way that you did, is practice and reading. Reading is how you get to be more intuitive about these narrative structures. You figure out how a story feels, like how a good story feels when you experience it, and just practicing, because you're honing your skills, so you get better and better and better all the time. And even as published authors, I still feel like I'm getting better all the time at translating my ideas onto paper. So for me, that is kind of the hardest part of writing, but also everything that Josh said, for sure. It's hard to stay motivated and it's hard to do it when you don't feel like doing it. But that is an excellent question. And now we are actually going to tackle kind of the opposite of this question. So we asked about the hardest part, and now we want to know, what is your favorite part of writing? And so the favorite part of writing, we are going to go to Mr. David Neilsen.
Well, for me, the favorite part of writing is when I call it, I fall in love with a story. I'll be writing a lot of different stuff. I'll write like a couple of days on one page, on one book, or one idea, trying to find something that snaps, and then suddenly the idea, I'll suddenly realize this is it. I will fall in love with this story, and then you can't stop me from writing. My family's like, where's Dad? I don't know, he's writing somewhere. Because I have become obsessed. I've fallen in love with the story, and I've got to follow it. And so when I hit that feeling, there is nothing like it. And that's my favorite part of writing.
Yes, I love it. Now, if only that could be all the time of writing. But as Josh and I know, that is usually not the entire process. But Jacqueline, what would you say is your favorite part of writing?
Like David, yeah, I always call it time traveling. That's what it feels like to me. The moment when you, like you said, fall in love. To me, it's when I go into another world. Like when you're sitting at the desk or wherever you happen to be sitting, scribbling away, drafting, and you look up at the clock and hours have gone by, and it's like you were actually in another world. You were in your character's house, you were in their school, you were in their creepy other world, wherever your character lives. It's this weird out-of-body experience, and you get to have it. So yeah, that's my favorite part. That's what feels like magic, and I'm so greedy for all those other experiences, even if they're creepy ones. I always feel so lucky when those moments come around. My other favorite part, kind of like Kim was saying, is where you're daydreaming before you have to start translating it onto paper, where you're just putting the ideas together and everything is possible and wonderful. That is also really fun. There's a lot of fun parts, all hard, but also fun.
Yes, there are so many favorite things to choose from, but we are these spooky middle grade authors, so we have to ask the question, how do you make a story scary? And for that, we're going to the amazing Samantha Clark.
Well, of course, you've got to have scary characters along with your protagonist. Your protagonist is not going to be scary, but there has to be that fear that they have. And for me, writing spooky scenes is one of my favorite parts of writing because it's all about the details, and it's about putting in those tiny little details, just like little tiny breadcrumbs along the way. So, for example, in The Boy, the Boat, and the Beast, when the beast shows up for the first time, I had to imagine, well, where is the boy? Well, he's in this forest. I love forests. So he's in this forest, and this beast is there, but he doesn't see it at first. And so what could be around him? What could his, senses sense that tell him that the beast is close by, but he doesn't yet see the beast. So maybe he hears a twig snap. Maybe he smells the beast. Maybe he feels the breath of the beast's, on the back of his neck. All of those little tiny details, just one at a time as you drag out the scene for as long as you can. I kind of think of movies a lot when I'm writing those kind of scenes and how they would play out in a movie and how I can drag them out as long as possible until the big reveal, which makes it very exciting. So that's one of my favorite scenes to write. Thanks, Kim.
Thanks, Samantha. And now let's go to the utterly terrifying David Neilsen.
I love to write things that are scary. I love to create that sense. The thing about writing scary things is that we have to do more work than most other writers because you, as a reader, are not naturally ready to be afraid. Fear is biological. It's about being safe. You're afraid if you're in danger, but if you're at home reading a book, you're not in danger. So we have to make you feel that way. And the best way to do that is to make you feel for the character and have the character be afraid. If you can put yourself in the shoes of that character, and then when the character's afraid, that fear will melt through into you, the reader. So you use a lot of atmosphere, like Samantha talked about. What do you hear? What do you feel? What do you smell? You use tension, you draw things out, and you continually go back to your character and how are they feeling? How are they feeling in here? They're afraid. What are they hearing? And that will create the fear in the reader that we want you to feel because we're evil and cruel. Back to you, Kim.
Yes, I love it. Well said, David. So now we are going to our final question for the evening. And this is a tough one. How do you figure out the plot of your story? Well, I'm actually putting myself in the hot seat for this one, even though I would say some people are big plotters and they do lots of planning and outlining ahead of time. I don't do a lot of that, but one thing that I do is I see David rolling his eyes. We're all different and there's no one right way to do it. But the one thing that I always do is I ask myself 2 questions, and I think several people talked about this earlier. I ask myself, what does my character want? And what does my character need? Now, the want is something my character is aware of. It's usually some kind of goal, something they want to get, and throughout the story, they're going to try to get it. It can't be too easy to get, so they're going to try, they're going to fail. The stakes are really high. If they don't get this thing, it's going to be awful for them, and you have to put big obstacles that escalate throughout the story in their way as they try to get this thing they want. That is the action story or the action plot. But they also have this thing they need. The thing they need is usually internal. They're often not aware of it, and it makes up the emotional storyline. So through this action storyline, as they try to get the thing they want, they're going on a journey. And as this journey progresses, they are learning things about themselves or about the world. Their perspective is changing. And that is this progression toward the emotional need that they didn't even realize they have being met by the end of the story. So once I know those 2 things, what my character wants and what they need, I can come up with like what journey they would have to go on to meet this want. Now, they may not get what they want. They could get what they want, they could not get what they want, or they might change their priorities by the end of the story. But one of those 3 things will probably happen. And the same thing with their emotional need. And that's kind of how I think of the plot, is just in those simple terms rather than doing like a huge outline sort of situation, because if I did, I would just change it. But let's go to the ghostly realm and see what Tania del Rio has to tell us about plot.
How do I figure out the plot of my story? For me, that's actually one of the hardest parts of being a writer. Some writers can just dive in and start typing and writing and then see where the words take them. But I can't do that. I really need a blueprint or plan before I can start writing. And so for me, one of the ways I like to do that is I use note cards. So in the very beginning, I'll just start with maybe 2 or 3. So I'll have to think about, okay, where does the story start? What happens sort of in the middle? And what happens at the end? And then once I have that, I'll start filling in more scenes. So each note card will have a scene on it that describes either something that happens to a character, or something a character does, or something a character says that's important for the story. And the nice thing about note cards is I can spread them all out and rearrange them, move them around, and eventually I'll come up with a plot that I'm happy with. And it just takes a lot of time and patience and revising. And even once I have the plot, sometimes as I'm writing, I'll realize something doesn't make sense and I'll have to go back and change some things. But I think it's important to be flexible and just do your best. So for me, it's hard, but it's worth it.
Thank you to you, Tania, for joining us once again from the ghostly realm. And I also want to say a huge thank you to all of you listeners out there for joining us today on our spooky middle grade on-demand school visit. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. And thanks to all of the authors as well. Should we give them our best, like, spooky, ghostly howl as we say goodbye? Goodbye! Woo!